I'm not buying her. Her freedom. Why?
Because nobody should have to live in a cage.
Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The auction hall went silent when they brought out the girl in the cage. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was rare, because everyone in the room knew what she had done. The metal cage rolled slowly into the center of the platform, its wheels screeching against the old floor. Inside sat a young alien woman. Her wrists were chained, her ankles were locked. A thick black collar surrounded her neck. Her skin was pale silver with faint blue markings running from her shoulders to her hands. Long white hair covered part of her face, hiding one golden eye. She was barefoot, thin, covered in bruises, but nobody looking at her believed she was helpless. The auctioneer stood beside the cage and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is our final item tonight." Nobody moved. He tapped the bars with a metal rod. The girl slowly lifted her head. The entire crowd took one step backward. The auctioneer laughed. "Don't worry. The restraint field is active." A man near the front raised his voice. "How strong is it?" "Strong enough." "That's not an answer." The auctioneer's smile widened. "She broke through 3 military containment cells." A murmur passed through the room. "She killed 12 guards." Another murmur. "She escaped a prison transport." The room became completely silent. The auctioneer looked at the girl. Her original designation was Lyra 7. The girl's jaw tightened. The auctioneer continued. "Her actual name is Lyra Vira." The alien woman stared at him with pure hatred. The auctioneer seemed to enjoy it. "She belongs to the Varan warrior species, extremely rare, extremely strong, extremely difficult to control." He stepped closer to the cage. "Which means, gentlemen, she is extremely valuable." Nobody raised a hand. The auctioneer waited. 5,000 credits. Silence. 3,000. Nothing. 1,000. Still nothing. Lyra slowly looked across the crowd. She saw fear, greed, curiosity, but no one willing to come closer. The auctioneer frowned. 500. A trader whispered to his companion. "She's gonna kill whoever buys her." "Then don't buy her." "I wasn't planning to." The auctioneer slammed the rod against the cage. 300 credits. A man laughed nervously. "No chance." The auctioneer's expression hardened. 200, silence. 100, nobody moved. Lyra lowered her eyes. For the first time, something different appeared on her face. Not anger, not hatred. Disappointment. She had expected this. Nobody wanted her. Nobody ever had. The auctioneer sighed. "Fine." He turned toward the crowd. 50 credits. Nothing. 20. A few people laughed. 10. Someone shouted from the back. "Give her away!" The hall erupted in laughter. Lyra closed her eyes. She had heard worse. Much worse. Then a quiet voice came from the rear of the room. 100. The laughter stopped. Every head turned. A man stood near the back wall. He wasn't wearing armor. He carried no visible weapon. His clothes were simple. A dark jacket, old boots, a faded shirt. His brown hair was slightly messy, and there was a thin scar above his left eyebrow. He looked like a mechanic. Not a soldier. Not a mercenary. Not a wealthy collector. The auctioneer stared. "You said 100. The man nodded. 100. Someone laughed. The auctioneer raised his eyebrows. "You're actually bidding?" "Yes." "You understand what she is?" The man looked at Lyra. "I understand she's hungry." A strange silence filled the room. The auctioneer frowned. 100 credits. He raised the hammer. "Any other bids?" Nobody moved. "Going once." He looked around. "Going twice." The hammer dropped. "Sold." The cage remained silent. The auctioneer approached the control panel. "Come here, human." The man walked forward. "My name is Mason Reed." The auctioneer didn't care. "Whatever you say." He entered Mason's payment code. A confirmation appeared. The auctioneer smiled. "Congratulations." He pressed the release button. The cage door opened. Lyra didn't move. Mason stopped several feet away. "You can come out." She stared at him. He waited. Nothing happened. "Are you deaf?" the auctioneer shouted. Lyra's eyes flashed. The auctioneer immediately stepped back. Mason noticed. He looked at the girl, then at the collar around her neck. "Can you remove it?" Lyra shook her head. Mason looked at the auctioneer. "Remove the collar." The auctioneer laughed. "That's not included." Mason's expression changed. "I paid for her. You paid for access. I paid for her freedom." The auctioneer's smile disappeared. "You don't understand how this works." Mason stepped closer. "I understand enough." The auctioneer shook his head. "The collar stays on." Mason reached into his jacket. Several people in the crowd moved, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a small electronic device. He held it against the collar. The collar beeped. The auctioneer's face went pale. "What are you doing?" Mason pressed one button. The collar opened. It fell to the floor. The hall went completely silent. Lyra stared at him. Mason stepped back. "You can leave." She didn't understand. "What?" Her voice was barely audible. Mason nodded toward the exit. "You're free." Lyra stared at him for several seconds. Then she stepped out of the cage. Nobody tried to stop her. She walked toward Mason. One step, two, three. Then she stopped directly in front of him. She was taller than he expected. Her golden eyes met his. "You bought me." "Yes." "Why?" Mason looked at the empty cage. "Because nobody else did." Her expression tightened. "That's not an answer." "It is." She studied him. Then she asked quietly, "What do you want?" Mason thought for a moment. "Nothing." Lyra stared at him as if he had spoken another language. "Nothing." "Then why?" Mason turned toward the exit. "Because I know what it feels like when everyone decides you're not worth saving." Lyra said nothing. He started walking. After 3 steps, he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't turn around. Lyra followed. The station outside the auction hall was crowded. Mason moved through the main corridor without hurry. Lyra followed 3 steps behind. Everyone noticed her. People moved away. Some stared, others whispered. A group of young men stood near a food stall. "That's the Varan. Someone actually bought her?" "Poor idiot." One of them laughed. Lyra's hands tightened. Mason kept walking. A voice called from behind. "Hey, monster." Lyra stopped. Mason stopped too. A drunk trader stepped into their path. He pointed at Lyra. "How much did he pay for you?" Lyra's eyes narrowed. The trader smiled. "Come on, show us those claws." She moved 1 step forward. Mason raised his hand. "Don't." Lyra froze. The trader laughed. "She listens to you?" Mason looked at him. "Walk away." The trader stepped closer. "You think buying her makes you important?" "No." "Then what makes you think I should listen?" Mason didn't answer. He simply stared at him. The trader's smile slowly disappeared. He stepped aside. Mason continued walking. Lyra followed. After several minutes, she finally spoke. "Why didn't you let me kill him?" "Because he wasn't worth killing." Lyra looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because I met worse." She said nothing, but something changed in her expression. Mason's ship was parked at the far end of the station. It was old, small, ugly. The hull had been repaired so many times that some sections were different colors. Lyra stopped at the ramp. "You live here?" "Yes." She looked at the ship. "You are poor." Mason smiled faintly. Very. For the first time, the corner of Lyra's mouth moved. Almost a smile. Almost. Mason opened the ramp. "Come inside." She didn't move. He looked back. "What's wrong?" Lyra stared at the ship. "If I enter, can I leave? Any time." "If I sleep inside. You can sleep outside if you want. If I refuse to work, you don't work for me." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Then what am I?" Mason answered immediately. "Free." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped onto the ramp. The ship's interior was small but clean. There was a kitchen, a narrow sleeping area, a workshop, 2 emergency escape pods. Mason walked to the food processor. You hungry? Lyra didn't answer. Her stomach did. A loud growl echoed through the room. Mason looked at her. She looked embarrassed. He smiled. That answers that. He prepared a bowl of hot protein stew. Then he placed it on the table. Lyra stared at it. Eat. She didn't move. Mason sat down several meters away. I won't touch you. Still nothing. He picked up his own food. Lyra finally approached the table. She smelled the bowl. Then she began eating. Fast. Too fast. Mason watched quietly. When she finished, she looked at the empty bowl. He stood. More? Lyra hesitated, then nodded. He gave her another serving. She ate more slowly this time. When she finished, Mason pointed toward a small cabin. There's a shower. Lyra stared at him. You can use it. She touched her dirty clothes. After that, there's a bed. Her expression changed. Mine? Yes. She looked at the bed. Nobody had given her a bed in years. Why? Mason shrugged. Because you're tired. That night, Mason went to sleep in the cockpit. Lyra remained awake. She stood in the doorway of her room, watching him. He had left his weapon on the table. His access card was beside it. The ship's control panel was completely unlocked. She could escape. She could steal the ship. She could kill him. He knew it, yet he had done nothing to stop her. Lyra walked to the table. She picked up the access card. Her fingers trembled. Then she looked at Mason sleeping in the pilot's chair. He looked exhausted. Not afraid. Not suspicious. Just tired. She put the card back. Then she returned to her room. For the first time in 6 years, Lyra slept without chains. 3 days later, Mason discovered something strange. Lyra never ate when he watched her. She waited until he left. At first, he thought she was simply nervous. Then he realized why. She was saving food. Every night, she had a portion under her mattress. Mason didn't say anything. Instead, the next morning, he doubled the food supply. Lyra noticed. She looked at him. You know. Yes. You're not angry? No. Why? Mason looked at her. Because hungry people save food. Lyra lowered her eyes. That afternoon, Mason entered the engine room. The hyperdrive was failing. He climbed onto a maintenance platform. Don't touch anything. Lyra stood below. I wasn't going to. The platform suddenly shook. Mason lost his balance. He fell. Before he hit the floor, Lyra moved. She caught him with one hand. The impact cracked the metal beneath her feet. Mason stared at her. She was holding his entire weight. Are you okay? He looked down. I'm alive. She slowly lowered him. Mason rubbed his shoulder. Thanks. Lyra looked away. You're welcome. It was the longest sentence she had spoken to him. That night, Mason found Lyra sitting near the viewport. Stars moved silently outside. He sat beside her. After a long silence, he asked, Where are you from? Lyra didn't answer. Sorry. He stood. Forget it. Vera. Mason stopped. She looked through the glass. My planet? What happened? They came. Who? Humans. Mason's expression tightened. Lyra continued. Not you. She touched one of the scars on her wrist. People like the ones who sold me. Mason said nothing. They wanted our genetic abilities. She looked at him. We were stronger than humans. Stronger how? Faster. Better hearing. Faster healing. She paused. Better soldiers. Mason understood. They made you into weapons. Lyra nodded. Then when we stopped obeying, they called us monsters. Silence filled the cockpit. Mason looked at her scars. How many survived? Lyra looked away. I don't know. A week later, the ship was attacked. The warning alarm exploded through the cabin. Mason jumped from his chair. Stay here. Lyra stood. No. Lyra, I can fight. I know. He grabbed a pulse rifle. That's why I'm telling you to stay. The ship shook violently. A docking vessel had attached itself to their hull. Mason checked the scanner. 6 life forms. Armed. He looked at Lyra. Who are they? Her face went pale. They found me. The airlock opened. 6 armored soldiers entered. Their leader removed his helmet. A scar ran from his forehead to his jaw. Lyra Vera. Lyra stepped backward. Mason raised his rifle. Who are you? The man smiled. Commander Drax. He pointed at Lyra. She belongs to the Varen Recovery Division. Mason shook his head. She doesn't belong to anyone. Drax laughed. You bought stolen property. I bought a person. Same thing. Mason fired. The battle began. The cabin erupted into chaos. 2 soldiers dropped. Another fired at Mason. Lyra moved faster than the eye could follow. She struck him across the chest. His armor cracked. He hit the wall. Drax fired a pulse weapon. Mason dodged. Lyra jumped between them. The blast hit her. She screamed. Lyra. She fell. Mason fired repeatedly. Drax retreated toward the airlock. Before leaving, he smiled. You don't know what she is. Mason looked at Lyra. What does he mean? Lyra slowly stood. Her eyes had changed. They were no longer golden. They were glowing white. The lights on the ship began to flicker. Mason stared. Lyra? She looked at her hands. I didn't want you to see this. A deep vibration moved through the ship. The walls began to shake. What are you? She looked at him. The last Varen. The ship suddenly went dark. Then every system came back online. But not normally. The entire ship was surrounded by a strange blue energy field. Mason looked at the instruments. That's impossible. Lyra's voice was quiet. It's what they were afraid of. What? She looked directly at him. I can control machines. Mason stared. All machines? No. She shook her head. Machines built by the Varens. Mason looked at the ship. The old freighter had been built using Varen technology. He finally understood. His ship wasn't just an old freighter. It was a weapon, and Lyra had just awakened it. Drax returned 2 days later, but this time he brought a fleet. 20 ships appeared around them. Mason looked at the scanner. We can't outrun them. Lyra stood beside him. No. What do we do? She looked at him. You trust me? Mason didn't hesitate. Yes. Lyra placed her hand against the control panel. The entire ship came alive. Every light turned blue. The engines screamed. Mason felt the ship rise. Lyra, she closed her eyes. Hold on. The freighter vanished. Not jumped, not accelerated. Vanished. 20 enemy ships fired into empty space. The fleet commanders stared at their screens. The old freighter had disappeared. Mason opened his eyes. They were somewhere else. A planet hung below them. Blue oceans. Green continents. Clouds. Beautiful. Lyra stared through the viewport. My home. Mason looked at her. You can take us there? She nodded. But there's nothing left. Then we'll build something. She turned toward him. You would stay? Mason smiled. I bought a ship. Lyra stared. Not me. Mason shook his head. I know. A small smile appeared on her face. Good. She reached for his hand. This time, Mason didn't move away. Neither did she. Outside the viewport, the abandoned world waited beneath them. The last Varen had finally returned home. And she had not returned as a prisoner. She had returned with a human beside her. A human who had raised his hand when everyone else looked away. A human who had opened the cage. And a human who had never once tried to close it again. Months later, the first Varen settlement began. Mason repaired the old machines. Lyra awakened the ancient technology. Together, they rebuilt what the galaxy had tried to erase, and whenever travelers arrived from distant worlds, they heard the same story. About a wild, alien girl. About a human who bought her freedom for 100 credits. And about the day the most feared woman in the galaxy finally chose where she wanted to belong. Not in a cage. Not under a collar. Not as someone's weapon. But beside the one human who had looked at a monster everyone feared, and seen a person who deserved a choice.